This may not be the matchup we've all been waiting for, but Warrior fans, this is the matchup we need. Now, the turmoil that's taken place in San Antonio this season has been well documented. A once airtight organization has had leak after leak surrounding their franchise player Kawhi Leonard. And much like the Patriots, people are asking, is this the death of a dynasty? Almost failing to make the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. Pop's system remains intact. The aging and missing talent is the problem. With the return of Kawhi nowhere in sight, Pop has once again altered their playing style, running everything through a rejuvenated LaMarcus Aldridge. For the Warriors, the game plan is simple. Stop LaMarcus and you stop the Spurs. Now, that's not necessarily an easy task. Aldridge is coming off a season averaging 23-8 at a 50% clip. LA is one of the few scorers in the league where if he's hot, there's just not much you can do about it. You got to send a hard double and force it out of his hands. His size, high release, and touch can be a deadly combination. He's nowhere near as athletic as he once was, and that costs him. But it shows itself much more on the defensive end. What does Bruce Lee say? I fear not the man who practices 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who had practiced one kick 10,000 times. That's kind of how you can think of his offensive game. He doesn't have a vast array of moves, but he's mastered two. His heat map resides on the left side of the floor. If the defense isn't giving strong help, he likes to turn left shoulder, take a hard dribble, hezzy, as if he's going to turn back right shoulder, and then give a shoulder charge on the second dribble and finish with a baby hook. Now, if the defender is sitting on his left shoulder or they are sending a double, he will turn right shoulder and hit you with a high release fadeaway that's nearly impossible to alter, a la that nigga Rasheed Wallace. Now, the devil's in the details. The success of any move and counter move is the ability to disguise it. They should look like the same move until they're not. Aldridge is very good at this, but there are some tells. He's going to start off with two dribbles towards the left shoulder. That is the disguise. If he really wants to go left shoulder, a lot of the time you're going to see him take an aggressive first step, lowering his hips, and initiate a bigger bump into the defender on the first dribble. When he does that, he rarely ever reverses back to the fade. He is committed to the right-handed hook shot. Now, if he wants to turn and fade right shoulder, he will again disguise it, starting with the two dribbles towards the left shoulder. But you will see him in a much more upright stance. Instead of really trying to gain ground, you will see smaller steps and smaller bumps into the defender. On the second dribble, he uses the contact to spin back right shoulder and shoot, where the help can't help and the defender can't get to the shot. That's his move and counter move. A couple of other things to note. Even with the lane, he very rarely drives all the way to the rim. His tendency is to pull up or jump stop. In fact, if he's going left, you can almost count on a jump stop at the rim. If he does find himself on the right block, he's gonna go right hook over the left shoulder. Only really using his left hand if it's a gimme. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, the Spurs are heavily reliant on Aldridge. They expect him to draw a double team and free up their shooters. So what should the Warriors do? Not send a double. This isn't reinventing the wheel. History has shown there's only a handful of players that can, for a lack of a better term, beat you on their own. There are plenty of guys with the skill to do it. Having the stamina, not just physically, but mentally, that's where, again, you're only going to find a handful of guys capable of doing so. And Aldridge certainly isn't one of them. So, who draws the task of guarding him one-on-one? The easy answer is Draymond, right? But I'd argue he's more valuable as a help defender and a rover. Don't get me wrong, on key possessions, they'll match up. And when I say don't double him, that doesn't mean don't help late. And that's where Draymond shines, helping at the right time. before I go any further, I want to qualify this by saying I don't think Pau Gasol can play much in this series. He'll just get destroyed in the pick and roll. And so that puts Aldridge at center. So what I propose is we start JaVale McGee on him. Now hold on. He did a surprisingly admirable job on him during their regular season matchups. He's one of the few guys in the league that when timed right, he can actually kind of alter that fadeaway. Now we know he's susceptible to fouls and he'll at best play 20 minutes. That's where the biggest surprise of the season steps in, Kevon Looney. His combination of strength, length, and patience should serve him well in this matchup. He isn't easily moved off his spot, he will stay down on fakes, and he has the length and timing to challenge without fouling. Of course, down the stretch with the death lineup, it's Draymond time. Now here are some of the key techniques for all of them who will take their turn on Aldridge. 1, do your work early. Don't let him catch it too deep. He's a heavy, big guy. If he gets in front of the rim, you're pretty much done. You've got to fight to keep him off his spots. 2, suck up his space and bother his shot pocket. Again, you're not going to block his shot. You're not going to get to his release point. So crowd him and make him alter his shot pocket. And 3, run the floor. Make him work. We all know he's heavy. He's not in the greatest of shape. On the other end, if you rim run and sprint the floor, he's not always going to get back. And if he does, it's going to wear him out. LaMarcus can average 30 in the series, but if he's not generating open shots for the other Spurs, I don't think they have a chance. Now, this strategy is going to take some discipline. He could start off a game, 4 or 5 baskets in a row. And I'm not suggesting we don't be dynamic. We can throw a flash double team at him and try to surprise him, right? But overall, I like the strategy of making him beat us on his own. I just don't think he has the mental stamina or physical stamina, and he may have big first halves, but down the stretch of games, I think he will wilt and fade. Now, the 2 players that I would avoid putting on Aldridge is 1, Kevin Durant. We know how slight he is, and in the few times he tried to guard him this regular season, he just got bulldozed right to the front of the rim. He's got a high center of gravity, he's light, and then he's not the most disciplined when it comes to staying down on shot fakes. David West, as disciplined as he is, and as quick as his hands are, I think he just doesn't have the size to deal with Aldridge's face-up game and jump shots. But ultimately, West shouldn't see too many opportunities to match up with him playing in that second unit. Let's talk a little bit about the other end of the floor. I had mentioned LaMarcus doesn't move like he once did, and when he's put in a pick and roll, he almost always yields the mid-range shot and retreats towards the rim, where he will and can block shots. This is why Quinn Cook is licking his chops. Quinn's greatest skill is shooting, and shooting off the dribble, off screens, you could argue is where he really shines. So expect a heavy dose of pick and roll with Quinn getting a lot of mid-range looks. I think he will force Aldridge, or whichever big it is, up, and it will be on him to make the right pass, which doesn't really come natural to him. So having a vertical spacer like JaVale setting the picks will make the passing lanes bigger. Now, DeJounte Murray is becoming an elite defender, and he'll gobble up any telegraphed passes. Cook will have to be decisive with the ball. Offensively, though, he's just not there yet. He scores most of his baskets in transition, ignited by his defense. So who's the primary ball handler for the Spurs? It's done by committee with Ginobili and Parker. I won't go too deep into their games. We're all familiar with them. But 2 things to note. Manu's dirty old man game, man, it's next level. I'm telling you. Drawing fouls, tugging on jerseys, the sneaky footwork, it's still all there. And if you let him go left, that 40-year-old man, he's going to put it on your head top. Tony's slowed down a lot more. At 35, coming off the torn quad, that's right, Kawhi, torn, he no longer gets to the basket at will. But much like an aging Jason Kidd, losing his legs has helped his jump shot. This brings me to the X factor for the Spurs. The only way I see them pushing the Dubs in this series is if Rudy Gay shows up, and shows up in a big way. The 11.5 he averaged on the season, coming off an Achilles, was a little bit surprising. But I think they're going to need something more like 20 points a game in this series. Here's why. Kyle Anderson, for all his craftiness, I just don't think he can defend any of the Warriors' wings. And if you're playing Aldridge heavy minutes, you're going to need Gay and Bertans' athleticism on the floor because both of them have much more switchability on defense. There are a lot of side stories and questions to this matchup. Are Mills and Green going to shoot the 3-ball well for San Antonio? how healthy is Andre Iguodala, right? But ultimately, the elephant in the room is when it's crunch time and with no Kawhi Leonard, the Spurs simply have no answer for Kevin Durant. I expect the two new pieces to the rotation to have a big impact in this series in Quinn Cook and Kevon Looney. It's funny, going into this season, the Warriors, this was supposed to be the deepest roster they've had thus far. But you take into account Steph missing 30-plus games, a sloppy, underachieving Nick Young, Andre Iguodala in and out of the lineup, and Patrick McCaw injured, and all of a sudden, that depth, particularly in the backcourt, is gone, and the Warriors look vulnerable headed into the playoffs. But what would you know, the luck of the draw? The San Antonio Spurs, the one team in the Western Conference that isn't reliant on a dominant guard. So, one, this allows Golden State to play to their depth at the forward position, and two, it buys Steph Curry more time. I believe Golden State can get the job done without the chef, buying him more time, letting him get more confidence in his knee, and not forcing him into emergency duty, which will bode well heading deeper into the playoffs. Warriors in 5.